So to recap then, we've looked at some different ways of kind of integrating different aspects of the exam into our lessons. So always thinking about what the task would look like and then trying to base our activities around it so that when the students actually come to do the test, they're already prepared, they know what to expect. With the flyers story, when you have the 3 picture prompts, one of the activities I quite like to do is to give my students a very simple template, just 3 boxes on a piece of paper, and tell them that they have to think of a story, but they can't write the story. They have to show the story in the 3 pictures. So they get to draw a comic strip. Then, once those pictures are ready, I'll pin them up around the room, and the students will walk around in pairs, taking it in turns to tell each other a short story based on the pictures. So I find that this is quite an efficient way of doing things, because instead of having to pay attention to one student in the class at a time, I've effectively got, in a class of 12, I've got 6 students who are talking as they go around to their partners, alternating the task. And as the teacher, I can then monitor to see if there are any issues going around, maybe feeding in a little bit of language to the students as they do it. But they tend to enjoy drawing the pictures, and they put quite a lot of effort into it because it is for them a little bit of an escape from the stress normally encountered in lessons. It is stressful to have to speak a foreign language for up to 90 minutes at a go. So giving them these little mental breaks where they're still thinking, they're still processing ideas, but they're doing it in a different way, I find is often very helpful to students. However, once our young learners get beyond a certain age, they don't really want to be treated as children anymore. They don't like these kind of glow happy pictures and having to make up stories about them. It's no longer relevant to their lives, or they might just have kind of aged out of the young learner system a little bit. In that case, we'll be looking at the equivalent to flyers, which is the A2 key exam. So when we get to A2 key, we're still at the same level in the framework as we would be with the flyers, but we can see that there is a kind of conceptual difference in the level of difficulty. It's a greater sophistication in the key, which is puzzling in a way because the two are supposed to offer the same sort of thing. If you can take the flyers and pass, you should be at the same level as A2 key. But I've seen a lot of students who did well at flyers struggle with key because conceptually they're not quite there yet. So once again, we find ourselves with a combined reading and writing paper. But now there are 3 productive tasks. The first one is an open close, like we've seen before. The second is a kind of guided writing, an email response. It's always an email and you have to respond. And then finally, there's a short story based on a prompt. So let's take a look at that guided writing, the email response, first of all. Actually, no, we'll go for the open close first, shall we? Because that makes most sense. So the open close, it looks like a more serious version of the flyers task. So here we have, very formal Cambridge style things, black and white, grayscale things. For each question, write the correct answer. Really? Not the wrong answer? Okay, if you insist. And write 1 word for each gap. And as you can see here, it looks like an email from 1997 with a blocky from button and to button. Thank you for your email. And then they go through, and much like in the flyers, they write their answers. One of the critical differences being that now they no longer can get away with just writing things on the question paper like they did with with flyers, you know, I think there's an answer sheet that they have to fill in with their answer for this. So it all becomes a lot more mature. The same principles hold though. So we have the same sort of language being practiced that we had at A2 flyers. So after that open close, we have a short email thing, 25 words. You're going shopping with your English friend Pat tomorrow. Write an email to Pat. Say where you want to meet, what time you want to meet, and what you want to buy. And the candidates have to write the answer on the answer sheet. Again, it's a more mature test. They might naturally think that they can just write in the white space just here. But if they do that, their answer won't be assessed. They need to write it on the answer sheet. So we have to take things more seriously. And then the final part, again, we have 3 pictures, but you can see at a glance that these are more serious pictures. And the expectation is a bit higher than it was in the flyers. In the flyers, the minimum expected was about 20 words. Now we're looking at 35 words or more. And again, they have to write the answer on the answer sheet itself. And here it's a little bit more difficult. You'll notice that there's a bit more spacing between the actions. So we have like preparation stage for this picnic. We've got the picnic itself, and then we've got the thing for after the picnic. So there's a little bit more going on that the students will have to grapple with. And for some students, this can be quite difficult. However, many of the techniques for flyers work well with this, and the same with the open close. The only thing that's really different is this idea of writing an email to somebody. So that's the one thing here that we would have to discuss in our breakout rooms that's not the same as we've already encountered with the flyers. And then the final exam that we're considering amongst our young learners exams is the B1 preliminary. And again, as I mentioned, it's the sort of level that you would expect at year 8 exam. So a lot of students will be quite stressed about it. So any help you can give will be good. They won't be taking the B1 preliminary for their year 8 exam, but there's a lot of crossover between them. A lot of the questions and the task types in most year 8 exams share a lot of similarities with the B1 preliminary. So here we've got 2 pieces of writing, and they are 100 words each. Look at the way that steps up, yeah? It's a massive difference, isn't it? Going from 30 words, 35 to 100, that's not twice as hard. It's not even 3 times as hard. It's much, much harder. We're only going up 1 level from A2 to B1. But like I said, it's a logarithmic difference. So it's in some respects, it's like 5 or 10 times harder, not twice as hard. The first piece of writing that they need to produce is a response email. So it's not just an email that's contextual like in the A2 key. Here we are given the original email and we need to respond, covering all 4 of the content points. And then in the second writing task, they have a choice of either writing an article or a story. So let's take a quick look at that then. And again, it's this formal kind of Cambridge presentation of a task, part 1 of the writing. And it is, I think, a separate writing paper, 45 minutes for the whole of it. Look how formal it all looks. It looks like a serious piece of work, doesn't it? You compare that to the shiny, happy young learner suite, and this could be just 2 years later for many students. They're in the world of the adults now, really. Part 1, you must answer this question, and you write it on the answer sheet. Read this email from your English teacher, Mrs. Lake, and the notes you have made. So we know what the subject is from the subject line. They have to read and interpret the email. They need to respond to all 4 points. And sometimes it can be difficult for them to know how to respond. For example, I'd like our class to have a party to celebrate the end of the school year. You have to respond to that at the start of the reply by saying that that's great. But that great thing has to be linked to the idea of having a party. Not, it's great, I got an email from you. Wow, thank you, Mrs. Lake. Lovely email. No, it's great we're going to have a party to celebrate the end of the school year. You have to respond that way. Then you have to answer the first thing, which is which would you prefer to do, but you have to explain. You can't just say, I want a party in the classroom. You have to explain why. You have to suggest activities for the party and suggest the food. Tell Mrs. Lake which food. So all 4 of the notes have to be incorporated for the students to achieve the highest marks. If they miss any of these content points, they won't get as many marks. Their band for example, the content will be lower. And then in part 2, they have a choice, and it is clear at the top, choose one of these questions. They aren't to write about both. I have seen candidates write about both. I've even seen at B2 first how when you're given 3 different tasks and you have to choose one, I have seen people try all 3. Cambridge understand that, and they will actually mark everything you give them and give you the highest mark that you earn. But in a 45-minute paper, trying to do both of the tasks is probably not the best idea. So the students have to write an article or a story. And again, that's something that you would want to practice with these sort of students. So in a moment, I'm going to be sending you off to the breakout rooms, and I want you to concentrate on 2 things. Talk about this email in part 1 of the B1 preliminary. You have the 4 content points. What would you do? What activities spring to mind? And the same really for the A2 key. You have this email with the 3 content points. How would you integrate that into the lesson, knowing that it's always going to be an email with 3 content points? Okay, so I'll be sending you off to your breakout rooms, and I'll come and join you in a moment. Those are the 2 questions, though. For the A2 key, how would you integrate this idea of writing an email into your lessons? For the B1 preliminary, how would you integrate responding to an email into your lessons?
Hey there.
I need to move away, otherwise it's going to be.
Oh, I can hear the telltale interference. Yeah. So, where would you like to start, guys? With the lower level or the higher in the email?
If I have it correct, the lower level, with the lower level, you said that the students are sometimes ego sets in and they don't want to do a gap fill activity that's similar to when they were younger. But do you still give them a gap fill activity, but instead of filling in the gaps, they have to write their responses on a separate sheet of paper? For example, in that first email with the how is the news, what's the weather like in your new city, etc. Do I have that correct?
Well, let me show you on the screen then. So for the A2 key, you had the open close, which is an email, and you are filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
But the email that you write in the final, in the next part of the A2 key is not a response to that first one. The 2 are completely separate. Because if a student can't do this or doesn't understand this, they would be basically double penalized in the next one. So the context of this email is completely different to the context of this one. We've kind of discussed the approach to this in our discussion of the A2 flyers, so I think we can kind of leave that for now. But what about this one, when we're looking at writing an email with 3 content points?
And then they need to
Sorry, Greg, I'm going to have to mute you if that's all right. There's been too much interference on the line. So, Lloyd, what do you reckon for this email task, writing a 3-point email?
When you say, okay, with the question, so what I reckon with, do you mean if what I think about it, or what do I think about the difficulty, or the...
No, how would you teach it? What would you do in class so that the students were ready?
Well, first, Well, would I? So I would model. So would I? But I would model I would model what I would do in the basically as a story, an email to my friend about etc. etc. And then I would ask them to do the same using those the 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is okay. Well, yeah, that's what I would do. I would basically model or show them or tell them and show them an email that I wrote to my friend about somewhere we're going to meet, what we're going to do. And then I would prompt them, assuming they're at the level to understand the task, I would then prompt them to do the same based on what I modeled for them.
Okay. Yeah, I think that could work quite well. Now, in terms of kind of leading up to that task, I might do it slightly differently, I think. I think at this level, the genre of writing is not so important. And the idea of writing here is very much like the idea of speaking. It's communicative. And it's usually between friends. So you don't need to do these writing tasks as writing tasks all the time. You can do them as speaking tasks.
Well, like peer work.
With pair work, or you could do it open class first to kind of show, get a model, and then do the pair work. Absolutely. But there is another aspect as well in terms of the presentation. Notice that it says that you're going to write an email to Pat, say where you want to meet, what time you want to meet, what you want to buy. Now, the first few times I practice this with my students, I wouldn't phrase it that way. I would phrase them as the questions. So I might have a picture of the shops and say, me and you are going shopping tomorrow. Where do you want to meet? What time do you want to meet? And what do you want to buy? I'd put the questions there so that the students can answer. And I'd say, for example, here's Mache. So Mache, we're going shopping tomorrow. What do you think? Tell me what you think. And then I would encourage them to give me full sentence answers to those questions. Then they can work in pairs, answering the same questions. But the idea is mostly that they have to answer all three in sequence so that they start to get the sense of a bigger text. Then eventually we can rephrase them so that they're commands rather than questions, and we can move from speaking to writing. But in essence, what you suggested, I think, is pretty much spot on. So that's really good. Okay, so what about the response email? I'll give you a couple of minutes to share your thoughts there.
That, so if you tell them write a letter, write an email about something that happened today at school, they might write, or because they like to talk so much sometimes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of students are happy to communicate. They're happy to do a piece of writing.
Yeah.
One little tweak to any particular writing I do with my students is to think about the content points themselves. Think about what they are usually connected with. So one might be about responding to part of the message. Like, oh, thanks so much for sending me this message. I'm really excited about this particular thing. So if you just say, oh, I want you to write an email about what you did yesterday, they will probably do that. Some of them will focus on one aspect, others will focus on every aspect, and some still will probably not know where to begin. So offering them a framework with content points they have to complete will help guide them through the task. And that's one of the reasons that these exams are shaped as they are, is so that students can actually find a way in. If it was just write to your teacher about the picnic at the school, a lot of students wouldn't know where to begin. And then, of course, the examiners wouldn't know what they were supposed to be assessing.
So is it like giving them hints as to what to...
Basically, yes. Yeah. But
Give them like a structure, a framework, like start with the greeting, then do,
Exactly. So giving them some sense of structure and the genre expectations of an email definitely helps, so that they don't even need to think what they're going to write. They know what to put at the start and at the end.
Yeah,
that can be very reassuring. Yeah.
I was mentioning before, like the structure of an email, like to, from, the subject and the body. and you know, what it all means, and then just putting in the information there too.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to look like an email. They're not going to have to draw a box or anything to put things in. But yeah, giving them some expectations there that they can fulfill is definitely very helpful for them. Good.
For 6 hours.
Oh, it's this guy.
It is this guy.
We're being monitored now.
Oh yes, so the email. So
Oh, silence. Don't tell him anything.
I love your ideas, guys. We can end it here.
I know, like we can use it now, you know. Hi, Chris. Wow.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of this session, but I wanted to give you a little takeaway idea, something that you could do in your classes at this sort of level that would be very useful for your students. Most students at this sort of age, even when they've reached B1 level, they're not always very conscious of examiner expectations. They are conscious of whether or not they're using good language, but they don't always know if they're doing the right thing for the right task. There's one way that you can really help them, but it does take a few minutes at least to prepare. So here we've got an example of the email response task for B1 preliminary. There are 4 content points. To get the highest mark for content, all other things aside, the students need to respond to all 4. So my suggestion is to start, when you're looking at this sort of thing, to start with a kind of consciousness or awareness raising activity about the importance of the content points. So I did this recently. I took one of these rubrics and I prepared 5 short responses. The first response was with good English, but somehow managed to avoid all of the content points. So I didn't say it's great. I said, oh, it's great to get an email from you. Thanks so much. We could either have a party in the classroom or we could go to the park. Which would you prefer to do? I think having a party is so much fun. We get to spend time with our friends. Yay! What sort of activities or games should we do during the party? It's really important to do games because if you don't do games, the students get bored, then they misbehave. And then what food do you think we should have at the party? Oh, I think if we have some games, we're all going to get really hungry. So there definitely has to be some food. Yeah. So it looks like we've approached the content points, but we've missed them all. But the English is good. Then I'd write another short response that answers one of the content points, and another response that answers 2, another that answers 3, another that answers all 4. So then I've got a collection of 5 short email responses, all with good English, but that would get very different content point results. Print them off, put them onto individual slips of paper, shuffle them, and give each shuffled collection to a pair of students and say, have a look at these. Here's the task, put it on the whiteboard. Can you put these into the right order for how many marks they would get? And see if the students can put them in order according to how many content points have been addressed. Don't tell them that's what they're doing. Don't tell them put them in order of the content points as they're addressed. No, ask them, how many points would they get? Which ones would get the most and which would get the least? Put those in order. And then see if they can become aware of the importance of addressing the content points themselves. So that's quite a nice activity. When I was setting it up, I think it took about 15, 20 minutes preparation time, but it is one that I can obviously recycle in the future. And then we can focus on the good model, the one that answers all of the content points so that the students know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, and that brings to a conclusion our little lesson on young learners and writing. I'm going to stop the recording now. So thank you very much for taking part in that.